Later, he might hate me for saying it. Right now, maybe he still appreciates it. That's the strange timing of this. I want to start by admitting my own anger, my own failures. I want to own the moments I stumbled, the moments that caused pain. But even as I say it, I feel the weight of what this apology really means. Let's set the scene. Las Vegas. Neutral ground. No familiar walls to soften the impact, no children to buffer the tension. Just two men and years of unspoken history pressed into one room. Cody Brown agreed to meet David Woolley there, knowing, or maybe not fully realizing, what that could spark. This wasn't a simple apology. It was an emotional pressure cooker. A test of power, reputation, and the quiet truths that nobody had fully faced. Officially, the meeting was supposed to be about clearing the air, making amends, offering peace. But anyone who's watched Cody for more than a few minutes knows how that phrase usually translates. A way to justify, explain, or reclaim control under the guise of regret. And as the conversation began, it quickly became clear that's exactly the path he took. David didn't request this meeting. He didn't need it. He already had stability, partnership, and the life he built with Christine. He showed up composed, calm, and unshaken. That quiet confidence created a tension Cody wasn't used to. He was accustomed to being the loudest, the center, the one driving every narrative. And here, he met a man who wasn't playing that game. Cody opened with what seemed like an apology, regrets about the past, acknowledgement of mistakes, the usual nods to emotional complexity. But it wasn't long before the words shifted into context, then into justification. The apology became a defense of his own perspective, how difficult things were for him, how misunderstood, how trapped by expectation. And David listened. Not nodding, not agreeing, just watching, waiting. That silence carried more weight than any argument could. Then David spoke. Simply, calmly, directly. Apologizing doesn't work if it comes with excuses. That one line changed everything. Cody wasn't used to being confronted like that, especially by someone who didn't fear him, someone who didn't need him to approve or validate them. And that line pierced a nerve. Cody tried to regain control. He reminded David of the pressures he faced, the responsibilities he carried, the complications no one could understand. But David didn't relent. He held up a mirror. Being overwhelmed doesn't excuse neglect. Leadership comes with accountability. An apology means nothing if it's still centered on yourself. That quiet confrontation escalated in subtle ways. Cody's defenses rose, his sentences tangled as he sought justification. He reminded David that others were hurting too, that plural marriage is complex, that he tried his best. And David's response cut deeper than any raised voice could. Christine suffered, long after the marriage ended. Her pain wasn't erased when Cody moved on. Intent doesn't erase impact. Cody's carefully orchestrated meeting, one he expected to control, fractured in that moment. He realized he wasn't just being challenged about events long past. He was being forced to confront the reality of his patterns, the echoes of his decisions, the lives affected by them. As the conversation continued, David detailed Christine's experience, not angrily, not dramatically, but with unshakable clarity. He described how she had learned to shrink herself to survive, how affection and validation were conditional, how trust and emotional safety had been compromised. Cody defended himself. I never withheld love as leverage. I did what I could. But David wasn't debating intent. He was reflecting outcome. Christine left not out of rebellion, but to preserve herself. And then, the moment that shattered Cody's narrative, Christine doesn't talk about you like you think she does. She's not obsessed with the past. She's building a life without needing your approval. Silence. And in that silence, Cody confronted the truth. Christine moved on, and he had no power to rewrite that. Relief, not anger, defined her present. The meeting became less about apologies and more about a reckoning. Cody tried to reframe. He spoke of respect, authority, sacrifice. But David reframed everything. Respect is earned through trust, not fear. Leadership is measured by presence, not control. Consequences exist even when no one thanks you for carrying the weight. Every attempt Cody made to reclaim authority to justify his perspective, was met with David's calm, precise boundaries. The dynamic was unshakable. Accountability over ego, truth over perception. And with each statement, Cody's illusions of control eroded. He realized the apology hadn't landed. He hadn't repaired anything. His story, his version of events, was no longer enough. The room shifted from confrontation to an uncomfortable awareness. Cody's attempts to soften the tension with platitudes about time healing wounds were countered. Time will only create distance if nothing is done now. David framed the moment not as a debate but as clarity. Christine reclaimed her life. Cody was forced to see it without excuses, without narrative control. By the end, the meeting revealed more than misaligned egos or past grievances. It revealed the persistent patterns of Cody's behavior, seeking validation, controlling perception, measuring worth by how others recognize him. It showed the contrast between two emotional frameworks, Cody negotiating for acknowledgement, David maintaining honesty and protecting autonomy. And in the quiet, the unspoken truths landed hardest. Christine's growth, her resilience, her ability to move on, those were undeniable. Cody's narrative of control, of centrality, of justified hurt, those crumbled. This wasn't a battle won or lost. It was a mirror reflecting decades of decisions, unexamined patterns, and the reality that some truths simply cannot be spun, explained away, or softened. They must be faced. The Las Vegas meeting, meant to be a simple apology, became a masterclass in accountability, emotional presence, and unavoidable reality. Intent and impact are not the same. Explanations do not equal understanding. Authority without empathy is hollow. And most importantly, true closure isn't about gratitude. It's about ownership, recognition, and facing the consequences of your actions. You might hate me for saying this later. Right now, maybe you still appreciate it. That's the strange part about timing and truth. I need to start by owning my anger, my missteps, the moments that caused pain, the things I wish I could undo. There's no easy way to say it, but it has to be said. Las Vegas. Neutral ground. No family home to soften the tension, no children running interference, no safe spaces to hide behind. Just two men, years of unspoken grievances, and the quiet weight of everything that was never addressed. Cody Brown agreed to this meeting with David Woolley, knowing, or at least thinking he did, what would happen when accountability showed up uninvited. Officially, the plan was simple. Clear the air, apologize, move forward. But anyone who's watched Cody for even a few minutes knows how quickly an apology can shift into justification, into explanation, into reclaiming the narrative. That's exactly what happened. David didn't ask for this. He didn't need it. He already has stability, a life with Christine, and a calm presence Cody has never been able to match. That calmness created an imbalance Cody wasn't used to. He's the kind of man who dominates the room, who expects to steer the conversation. But here, he faced someone unshaken, someone who wasn't there to validate him. Cody began cautiously, offering words meant to sound reflective, regrets about the past, nods to mistakes, acknowledgement of tension. But it didn't stay that way. Almost instantly, the words became context, then explanation, then defense. The apology was no longer about Christine. It was about Cody's experience, his stress, his misunderstood intentions. David's response was quiet, steady, and precise. Apologies don't work when they come with excuses. That one line shifted everything. Cody wasn't accustomed to being challenged calmly by another man who didn't fear him, who didn't need him to dominate or approve. And in that silence, the real tension began to crack the room wide open. Cody tried to reclaim control. He spoke quickly, layering explanations over explanations, how complicated it was, how pressured he felt, how misunderstood. He reminded David that everyone had been hurting, that plural marriage isn't easy, that he had done his best under impossible circumstances. But David didn't flinch. He didn't interrupt or argue. He held up a mirror instead. He laid it out plainly. Being overwhelmed doesn't excuse neglect. Leadership isn't just holding things together. It's how the people within that structure feel while you do it. An apology loses meaning if it still centers on the one giving it. Each word hit Cody in a place he wasn't ready to face, forcing him to confront not just what happened, but the patterns that made it happen. Then David turned the focus to Christine. Not in accusation, not in dramatics, but with unflinching clarity. He described the emotional toll she endured, how years of conditional love and unheard needs shaped her decisions. Cody countered immediately. He had loved her, he had tried, he had done what he could. But David wasn't debating intent. He was pointing out impact. Christine's departure wasn't rebellion or spite, it was survival. The energy in the room shifted. Cody realized this wasn't about winning an argument or being seen as the hero of his own story. This was about truth. Christine had moved on. She wasn't consumed by the past. Relief, not anger, defined her present, and Cody was forced to witness it without defense. Cody attempted reframing. He spoke of respect, authority, sacrifice, and control. But David dismantled each point with quiet precision. Respect isn't compliance, it's trust. Leadership isn't about steering the ship, it's about making those inside it feel safe, heard, and valued. Consequences follow actions, no matter how noble the intent. Every attempt Cody made to regain authority or control only highlighted the gap between his self-perception and the reality of those he affected. By the end of this exchange, the meeting was no longer a polite conversation. It had become a reckoning. Cody's carefully curated narrative, the story he had been telling himself for years, was cracking under the weight of lived experience. This wasn't about apology anymore, it was about accountability, clarity, and facing truths he had long avoided. Cody's defenses began to unravel. Every sentence he spoke grew faster, more tangled, more desperate. He tried to frame the situation as mutual blame, how Christine made choices, how she pulled away, how communication broke down. But David didn't let him redirect. Calm, steady, unwavering, he drew the line. Christine had communicated. She had spoken her truth. She stopped believing she was being heard, and that's why she left. Silence wasn't surrender, it was self-preservation. That hit Cody like a physical weight. The story he had held onto for years, the one where he carried the burden, where Christine's choices explained everything, started to crumble. Christine's actions weren't a reflection of rebellion or defiance. They were proof of her strength, of her survival. And Cody had no words that could reshape that reality. David went further, not to attack, but to expose perspective. He described who Christine was when they met. Cautious yet warm, kind yet guarded, second-guessing herself far too much. He connected the dots without dramatics. Living in a system where love and attention felt conditional teaches a person to shrink. To survive, Christine adapted, protected herself, and eventually stepped away. Cody responded defensively, insisting he had never manipulated or withheld love. But David wasn't interested in debate. He was focused on outcomes, on how Christine's life had been shaped, and how it was now reclaiming itself. Every attempt Cody made to justify, to reclaim the narrative, to regain the upper hand, was quietly but firmly met with truth. Christine's happiness now wasn't performative. It wasn't about proving anything to Cody. It was real. She had rebuilt, reclaimed autonomy, and moved forward without needing his validation. That realization pressed on Cody like a mirror he wasn't ready to look into. As the room grew heavier with truth, the dynamic became clear. This wasn't a confrontation of past events. It was an exposure of patterns. Cody's need for validation, his habit of framing himself as central to every story, clashed with David's grounded, unwavering focus on accountability and present reality. And in that clash, Cody's illusions of control fell apart. By the end of this part of the meeting, what was supposed to be a controlled apology had become a reckoning of character, influence, and perspective. Cody couldn't manage the narrative, couldn't rewrite history, and couldn't hide behind intent. David's presence ensured that the focus remained where it belonged, on impact, on truth, and on the lives affected by decades of choices. By now, the meeting had evolved into something far beyond apology. Cody tried one last time to reclaim authority, talking about leadership, responsibility, sacrifice, and how he had carried the family through challenges no one else could understand. He framed it as protection, as stewardship, as evidence of the weight he bore. But David didn't counter with anger or accusation. He countered with clarity. Holding things together doesn't erase emotional absence. Leadership isn't just survival, it's presence. Respect isn't obedience. True accountability doesn't come with expectation of gratitude. Each statement chipped away at Cody's carefully constructed self-image. Every attempt to justify or defend was met with calm reflection. When Cody insisted Christine's happiness now seemed performative, David's response cut through with quiet finality. She doesn't need to perform. She's lived without it long enough to recognize the real thing. The room shifted. Cody's illusions of control, centrality, and influence were quietly dismantled, piece by piece. David went on, framing Christine's growth, autonomy, and resilience not as rebellion, but as survival and strength. Cody realized that the narrative he had relied on for years, the one casting himself as misunderstood, wronged, central, no longer held. Christine's story wasn't about him anymore. She had moved on, and there was nothing he could do to change that. Relief, not anger, defined her present, and that truth landed harder than any confrontation ever could. By the close of the meeting, the silence was thick, not with tension, but with realization. Cody understood, in a fleeting, uncomfortable way, that this wasn't a battle he could win. David wasn't there to fight. He was there to set boundaries, illuminate impact, and reflect truths Cody had avoided for decades. There was no applause, no handshake, no closure in the way Cody might have imagined. Instead, there was a mirror, a clear reflection of the gap between intention and consequence, ego and accountability, perception and lived experience. The Las Vegas meeting revealed patterns that extended far beyond the hotel room. Cody's need for validation, his habit of framing every story around himself, and his struggle to confront emotional reality were laid bare. David's calm, grounded approach highlighted the contrast. One man seeking acknowledgement, the other prioritizing honesty, accountability, and the autonomy of those affected. Christine's resilience and agency were underscored in ways that Cody couldn't control, argue against, or diminish. Ultimately, the meeting didn't fix reputations or repair relationships. It exposed the consequences of decades of choices, the inevitable reckoning of impact over intent. Cody left not with validation, but with truth, a truth that reshaped how he, and everyone watching, would understand what it meant to be accountable, to recognize boundaries, and to face the realities of emotional responsibility.